The sun blazed over Scottsdale, Arizona, casting waves of heat across the blacktop outside a high-end auto showroom known as Monarch Elite Motors. The dealership shimmered beneath the desert sun, each luxury car out front gleaming like a trophy. From sleek European imports to powerful American muscle, the collection screamed opulence. Pulling into the farthest corner of the lot in a plain, slightly dusty SUV, Darrell Carter stepped out and surveyed the building. He wore a simple hoodie, faded jeans, and comfortable sneakers, nothing flashy, nothing designer. That was intentional. As the newly minted owner of Monarch Elite, Darrell wasn't here to be celebrated. Today wasn't about press releases or ribbon cuttings. It was about clarity. He wanted a raw, unfiltered glimpse of how his employees behaved when they thought no one important was watching. Inside the glass-wrapped showroom, the atmosphere was cool and pristine. The sharp scent of new leather, rubber, and showroom polish hung in the air. A few employees gathered near the reception desk, chatting quietly and laughing among themselves. Their laughter faded as the door opened. Darrell stepped in. Eyes turned. There was a pause, not overt, not aggressive, but noticeable. Quick glances were exchanged, subtle evaluations made. To them, he was just another walk-in customer. Maybe someone killing time. Maybe someone who wandered in just to feel rich for 5 minutes. Either way, not someone worth real attention. Then she approached. Susan Matthews. She walked with intent, every step from her patent heels a declaration of control. Her blazer was immaculate, her posture rigid with purpose. She had the air of someone used to running the floor and making snap judgments. "Good afternoon," she said, her tone professional but distant. "Can I help you with something?" Darrell offered a friendly smile. "Just looking around." Susan's eyes gave him a quick scan. Hoodie, sneakers, relaxed posture. She folded her arms, clipboard still in hand. "Are you in the market for something specific?" she asked, a thread of skepticism in her voice. "Maybe," he replied calmly. "Thought I'd see what caught my eye." Her response was immediate, reflexive. "Well," she began, voice cool, "our showroom caters to a certain level of clientele. Most of our vehicles require pre-approval. I'd be happy to direct you to something more fitting." Before Darrell could reply, another employee shouted across the room, "Susan, the transport guy's asking where to park." Susan barely glanced in that direction before locking her gaze back on Darrell, eyes narrowing just a touch as if afraid he might wander too far or touch something he couldn't afford. Darrell's eyebrow lifted slightly. "So you're assuming I wouldn't qualify?" That question clearly threw her for a second. She recovered quickly, plastering on a strained smile. "I'm just trying to be efficient with everyone's time," she said. "These vehicles are a significant investment. They start well into 6 figures. Darrell gave a polite nod. "Appreciate the info." He drifted toward a striking silver coupe, its angular lines and sculpted bodywork giving it a commanding presence. He leaned down to examine the interior, his fingers casually brushing the door handle. "Beautiful design," he murmured. Susan took a step forward. "Sir, we do ask visitors not to touch the vehicles unless accompanied by a sales associate. If you'd like to schedule a consultation, we can arrange something once you've submitted a financial application." Darrell straightened, his demeanor calm as ever. The unspoken judgment hung heavy in the air, but he let it pass. "Sure," he said lightly. "I might just do that." And with that, he turned, scanning the showroom one last time not as a customer, but as the man who held the deed to everything inside. She had no idea. But she was about to find out. Darrell took a slow step back from the silver coupe, slipping his hands into his pockets. He gave Susan a slight nod and motioned toward her clipboard. "All right then," he said, voice calm and level. "Let's hear it. What would you suggest for someone like me?" Susan blinked, clearly thrown off by the directness. Before she could answer, Darryl added with a trace of irony, "If you already have me figured out, I'm listening." Her polite expression faltered just for a second. Then came the measured reply, "Well, maybe something a bit more affordable. I can direct you to a nearby dealer that specializes in gently used inventory." A faint smile touched Darryl's face, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "That's quite the conclusion you've jumped to," he said quietly. The words lingered in the air. For a moment, Susan looked unsure. But she quickly stiffened, cleared her throat, and turned on her heel. "I'll go put together a list," she muttered, heading off with quick, deliberate steps. Darryl watched her go, expression unreadable. Then he turned back to the coupe. In the polished chrome and paint, his reflection stared back at him. Yeah, this was going to be an interesting day. Standing alone in the middle of the pristine showroom, Darryl let his gaze sweep across the cars. He wasn't angry he'd experienced this kind of judgment before. The assumptions. The quick sizing up. Around him, the staff had resumed their low conversations, though he still caught the occasional glance cast in his direction. Moments later, Susan returned. She clutched her clipboard like it was armor, her pace brisk, her expression strained. "I've compiled a few options," she said, stopping just short of him. "These might be better suited to your situation." Darryl raised an eyebrow. "My situation?" She didn't flinch. "Yes. These are quality vehicles, certified pre-owned, dependable, and more in line with what you might be looking for." She handed him a printout. Darryl glanced at it. A few older models, some smaller hybrids, a used SUV, each listing carefully priced well below the typical high-end cars in the showroom. He studied the page for a few seconds, then folded it neatly and slid it into his pocket. "Thanks for putting that together," he said evenly. Susan seemed momentarily unsure of how to respond to his composure. But then she tilted her head and lowered her voice slightly, as if sharing a bit of hard truth. "Look, I'm just being practical," she said. "This place isn't for everyone. I don't want to waste your time." Darryl met her gaze, cool and steady. "And what makes you so sure I don't belong here?" There was a pause. Just a second's hesitation. Then she said, "I've worked in this business long enough. I know when someone's out of place." "Out of place," Darryl echoed softly. Interesting choice of words. He watched her carefully. There was a flicker of doubt in her eyes, but she pressed forward anyway. "It's nothing personal. It's better to be realistic than to let someone walk out disappointed." Darryl let out a quiet chuckle and gave his head a slight shake. "You like being upfront. I can respect that. So how about this? How about you let me speak to the owner?" Susan froze. "The owner?" she repeated. Darryl nodded, voice casual. "Yeah. Just a quick conversation. Think you can make that happen?" Susan gave a tense laugh. "I'm afraid the owner doesn't just pop in unannounced. They have a full schedule, very high-level commitments." "I'm sure they do," Darryl said, his tone friendly but firm. "Still, I think they want to know I'm here. Go ahead, give them a call." Her expression tightened, frustration creeping in at the edges. "Sir, I'm trying to be polite, but this is getting a little absurd. I have other clients to attend to. If you're genuinely interested in purchasing, we can schedule a formal consultation. If not..." Darryl raised a brow. "If not, what?" Susan crossed her arms. "Then I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The air in the showroom seemed to still. Conversations dimmed. A few nearby employees had taken notice. Darryl didn't move. He just looked her in the eye, calm, composed, unwavering. And then everything changed. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Slowly, Darryl reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "All right," he said, scrolling casually through his contacts. Guess I'll make the call myself. Susan's brow creased. Wait, what are you doing? Just calling the owner, Daryl replied smoothly, lifting the phone to his ear. Shouldn't he take more than a minute? The confidence in her posture wavered. The annoyance in her tone began to dissolve into confusion. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words formed. Nearby, a few employees had paused mid-task, their curiosity drawing them into the moment unfolding across the showroom. Daryl held up a single finger, signaling for patience, then turned slightly away as he spoke into the phone. Hey, it's me. I'm at the Scottsdale location. Everything's good, just a small hiccup. Let them know I'm here. He ended the call and slid the phone back into his pocket, then turned back to face Susan. They'll be here shortly, he said evenly. Susan stared at him, lips parted slightly, as if her brain was trying to catch up. Who did you just call? Daryl didn't respond right away. Instead, his eyes drifted across the showroom, taking in the watching employees. We'll see in a second, he said, almost like he was enjoying the moment. The atmosphere thickened. Silence settled like fog. Even the background music seemed to fade into the tension. Susan shifted uncomfortably, her fingers white-knuckling the clipboard she clung to. Her posture was stiff, and every movement she made betrayed the unease building beneath her polished exterior. Daryl remained by one of the high-end SUVs, leaning casually against the side, perfectly at ease. It was the calm in him, unbothered, self-assured, that only amplified the discomfort in the room. A soft chime broke the silence. The front doors swung open, and a well-dressed man in a crisp navy suit walked in, his shoes clicking quietly on the tile. His expression was a mix of warmth and seriousness, eyes scanning the showroom until they landed on Daryl. Mr. Carter, the man greeted warmly, extending his hand as he approached. It's great to see you. Daryl took the handshake with a firm grip, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Appreciate you coming, Alex. The room froze. Whispers died instantly. Susan's hands nearly fumbled her clipboard as she looked between Daryl and Alex, the dealership's regional director. Her confusion twisted into realization. Wait. Mr. Carter, she echoed, her voice shaky. Alex turned toward her, his warm smile gone, replaced by a more formal tone. Yes, Susan. I see you've already spoken with Mr. Carter. She blinked rapidly, trying to process what she was hearing. I didn't realize that he owns this dealership, Alex finished sharply. Yes. He's the new majority partner and side investor for Prestige Scottsdale. He turned back to Daryl with a touch of regret in his eyes. I'm guessing this wasn't quite the welcome you were expecting. Daryl raised a hand gently, stopping him. It's okay, Alex. Susan and I just got off on the wrong foot. His voice was calm, but it carried weight now. The kind of weight that settled on everyone in the room. Susan took a step back, her face pale, her clipboard now clutched like a shield. I'm so sorry, she stammered, voice small and strained. I had no idea. You didn't know what? Daryl asked softly, his tone still measured. That someone like me could be standing here as the owner, that maybe I belong just as much as the next guy in a tailored suit. Her eyes widened. She looked utterly lost. I didn't mean. Daryl gently raised a hand, cutting her off. It's fine, really, he said. Then he stepped just slightly closer, his voice lowering not with threat, but with clarity. But let me ask you something, Susan. If I wasn't the owner, would anything about how you treated me today have changed? Would I still be worth your time? Susan opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her silence said more than an apology ever could. Daryl turned to Alex, his voice now carrying quiet authority. Let's bring everyone into the conference room. I think it's time we had a discussion about the kind of culture we want to build here. Without a word, the staff began moving, the unspoken tension pushing them toward the sleek glass-walled conference room at the far end of the showroom. Despite the upscale furnishings and polished design, the room felt tight, claustrophobic. No one said a word as they filed in. Susan sat near the end of the table, her gaze lowered, her earlier confidence replaced by quiet shame. Susan sat near the end of the conference table, a stark contrast to her earlier poise. The confident veneer was gone, replaced by quiet unease. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her gaze fixed on the floor. Darryl stood at the head of the table, calm and composed. There was no need to raise his voice, his presence alone commanded attention. Near the door, Alex stood with his arms folded, his expression unreadable as he observed the team settle in. Once the soft hum of chatter died down, Darryl cleared his throat. "Thanks for gathering on such short notice," he began, voice steady and composed. "For those who haven't met me yet, I'm Darryl Carter, and as of last month, I became the new owner of Prestige Motors." A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Some faces showed curiosity. Others guilt or discomfort. Susan kept her eyes down. "I showed up today in casual clothes for a reason," Darryl continued, pausing briefly. "I wanted to see how things run when no one knows who I am. I wanted to walk through the front doors the way any customer might." He let the silence stretch just long enough before adding, "And what I saw was disappointing." He didn't look at anyone in particular, but everyone in the room felt it. "I was judged not for who I am or what I might bring to the table but by my appearance. And while I'm not here to point fingers, I am here to talk about what that reveals about this company's culture." Susan shifted in her seat, her face warm with embarrassment. Darryl's eyes flicked to her for only a moment before returning to the team. "This isn't just about what happened to me. It's about what could happen to anyone who walks in here and doesn't fit a certain image. We have to be better than that." A young sales associate tentatively raised a hand. Darryl nodded. "Sir," the man said nervously, "I think most of us try to treat everyone fairly. But, sometimes people make snap judgments. Not intentionally, it just happens." Darryl gave a slight nod. "I hear you. Bias isn't always loud, it's quiet, unconscious, but that doesn't make it harmless. And it doesn't mean we ignore it. We have to challenge those instincts. We have to lead with respect, every single time." He stepped forward slightly. "This dealership is known for high-end vehicles and top-tier service. But the real standard of excellence is in how we treat people. All people. From this point forward, that's the reputation we're going to protect." Around the room, some heads nodded. A few employees looked thoughtful. Even those who still looked guarded seemed to be listening. Darryl's eyes returned to Susan. She hadn't moved. Her shoulders were tense, and her hands were still clenched in her lap. "Susan," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "I'd like to give you the floor. Is there anything you'd like to say?" All eyes turned to her. She hesitated, visibly unsettled by the attention. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I made a mistake," she admitted. "I misjudged you. And for that, I'm truly sorry." Darryl gave a small nod. "Thank you for acknowledging that." He paused, then added, "Let this moment be a reminder to all of us. Change doesn't start with speeches, it starts with accountability." Turning back to the team, his tone grew purposeful. "We'll be rolling out new training programs to make sure our customer service reflects the values I believe in: dignity, inclusion, and professionalism. Every person who walks through these doors deserves to be treated with respect. No exceptions." He scanned the room. If anyone has a problem with that, now's the time to speak. Silence. The room remained still, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning. No one objected, but the weight of Darryl's words hung in the air. After a moment, he gave a quiet nod. "Good, he said. That's what I like to hear. Change can be uncomfortable, but it's necessary. And I'm not here to shame anyone, I'm here to lead. He leaned forward, placing his hands lightly on the edge of the table. I wanted to understand the culture I was stepping into. And now that I do, it's time to reshape it. His gaze returned to Susan. You're a veteran in this business. I'm sure you've earned your position through hard work. But today was a wake-up call for all of us. For the first time, she looked up and met his eyes. Her voice trembled, but her tone was sincere. I understand. I was wrong. And I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Darryl studied her for a moment. I believe in second chances, he said. But they only matter when accountability comes first. We'll meet privately to discuss your next steps. Then, turning back to the rest of the team, this dealership is more than a place to buy cars. It's a place where people are seen, respected, and treated with integrity. That's the standard from now on. If you're with me, I've got your back. This time, the murmurs of agreement were louder. More genuine, a few employees even straightened in their chairs, energized by the clarity of the message. Even Alex, who had remained quiet until now, gave a small nod of approval. Darryl allowed himself a faint smile. Not triumphant, just steady. Resolved. All right then, he said. Let's get back to work. And remember, how we treat people means more than anything we sell. As the team began filing out of the room, the atmosphere had shifted. What had started as tension had turned into something else, something closer to shared purpose. Susan lingered near the doorway. She walked up to Darryl slowly, her voice soft. Mr. Carter. I just want to thank you for giving me a chance to do better. I won't take it for granted. He looked at her for a moment before replying, his voice calm. I hope not, Susan. Words are easy. But actions, that's what matters. She nodded firmly. You'll see. Darryl watched her go, then turned to Alex. Let's schedule a staff meeting next week, he said. I want to be clear about the expectations moving forward. Alex gave a respectful grin. You got it, boss. Darryl walked back into the open showroom. The polished floors, the rows of gleaming vehicles, the afternoon light catching on chrome, everything looked the same. But it felt different. This wasn't just a business. It was a chance to build something better. A place where no one would be dismissed for how they looked or where they came from. And Darryl was ready to lead the way.